Good evening, Lake Orion. Welcome to History Now here on ONTV. I'm your host, Anthony Taramina. Hope you guys are doing well. I want to talk to you guys about the Great War, World War I, the, quote, war to end all wars. That's what it was called from, and the World War I lasted from 1914 till 1918. As I said, it was the Great War, the war to end all wars. It's important to understand what Europe was going through after 1815 with the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars. If you look at a map of Europe, France was defeated, but France became integrated with European society, as did Britain, as did Russia, but also as Austria and Prussia also integrated with Europe following 1815. Now, at that point, we would see the rise of Prussia. In my earlier segments of History Now, I talk about Germany, particularly German nationalism. Prussia was really the country that unified Germany under the Prussian name and not under the Austrian name. Now, Germany at that time was starting to become very, very powerful, and there was a very strong alliance system in 1890 that consisted of Germany, Austria, and Italy. Now, at that point, Germany and Austria had reconciled their differences. There was also the, as I said, Prussia went to war with Denmark, crushed Denmark in 1856. Prussia and Austria went to war, and which unified Germany. Then in 1871, they also went to war with France, and it proved that Germany was a formidable opponent for Europe and would be a major player in European politics for years to come. Also, you had colonies going on, especially in Africa. Britain, France, Germany. Also, you have to mention Spain and Portugal because they were both in Africa as well, but particularly Britain, France, and Germany were all involved in Africa as well. So they had colonial interests as well during the 1880s, 1890s, and then into the 1900s. Then you also saw the rise of nationalism that was occurring in several European countries, especially in countries that was occupied by Austria-Hungary, because at that point Austria-Hungary was a dual kingdom, but it was under the Austrian Empire. You also had these alliance systems. I made mention of the Bismarck alliance system early on with Germany, Austria, and Italy, but also we had another one of the Entente Concorde of 1902 with Britain and France, and then in 1906 it would grow to include Russia. So you had these alliance systems between Britain, France, and Russia, and then you have Germany, Austria, and Italy. And it was going to eventually lead to some sort of war at some point, especially as Germany was growing in power. Britain and France were becoming very concerned about it. And you could also see that war was in the air. Now, Germany at that time, Bismarck had been kicked out of power by Kaiser Wilhelm II. Kaiser Wilhelm II was, in German history, he'll go down as probably one of the worst rulers to rule the German Empire, and was responsible for the end of the second German Empire that took place and the Second Reich. It was the Second Reich he was responsible for the end of the Second Reich. And that took place from 1918, but he ruled from 1890 to 1918. But also at that time, as I made mention, you had the rise of nationalism that occurred, especially in Austria-Hungary. You were talking about German unification, German nationalism, but the Serbs wanted to break from Austria-Hungary. And there was wars going on between Greece and the Ottoman Empire. You had the struggles in the Balkans, especially in 1912. The Ottoman Empire struggled to regain control of the Balkan areas. Now, at the time, the Ottoman Empire is this old empire that was still there, that was mostly in the Middle East, often seen as the sick man of Europe. Now, you had what also would trigger this is the Serb nationalists, is also the assassination of Archduke Francis Ferdinand. The Archduke was at that time second in line of the throne for Austria-Hungary. He was assassinated in Sarajevo, which was seen as major player in Serbia at the time, but also in Bosnia Herzegovina and Serbia. So the assassination of the Archduke at that time was not very popular. That's one of the biggest things that people tend to assume, was that the Archduke was very popular. He was not. Austria was not very popular in the Balkan area. They saw Austria as a colonial power trying to take them over, and they wanted independence from Austria. So there was a lot of nationalistic movements that was occurring in Serbia. Also, Serbia was a big-time ally of Russia. Russia had supported Serbia. Russia still does to this day. And Russia would support Serbia in their attempt of independence from Austria-Hungary. Russia also had a rivalry with Austria-Hungary over the Balkans as well. So Russia had interests in that area too. So by the time of the assassination of the Archduke, the Austrians and his wife, the Austrians demanded that Serbia be held responsible for his murder, which Serbia said, no, we're not responsible, our government was not responsible. So Austria gave Serbia an ultimatum, and the Serbs did not comply with it, and as a result, they went to war. So Austria declared war on Serbia, and it caused a chain level of events. Russia declared war on Austria-Hungary. Serbia would declare war on Austria-Hungary as well. Germany would side with Austria-Hungary, though at first reluctant to do so, because it was seen as an Austrian problem. Austria asked for help, and Germany obliged. Germany also declared war on France, who was allied with Russia. And Britain declared war on Germany. So now we have Europe once again going to war for the first time in almost 100 years. Now what's interesting is Japan goes to war with Germany. Asia gets involved. Now what's interesting about Asia is seen as Europe, like Africa, Europe is colonizing Asia. There's a lot of islands there. China was not necessarily a power yet in Asia. So there was and Japan was seen as a superpower that essentially was left unchecked. The only country that could check it was the United States. And the United States and Japan at that time were on very good terms. So as a result, Japan went to war with Germany. Japan sided with Britain. And at that time, Britain had the most powerful navy. Adding with it Japan's navy, they had complete dominance over the Pacific. And Japan took advantage of invading the islands, of especially the German-controlled areas of China and also of the islands. So Japan, in my view, by going to war with Germany, was very opportunistic. They invaded German colonies, German territory, and as a result, the war benefited Japan very, very highly, and they ended up being one of the major players, especially in Asia. Now the Ottoman Empire gets involved. The Ottoman Empire also gets involved in the war, especially in 1915. They declare war on Britain and France. They choose to side with Germany. And it said the Ottoman Empire was considered the sick man of Europe. Now, there was an initial excitement for war on both sides. War, yeah, war will be over by Christmas. I'm excited to go to war. They had no idea what they would be seeing. When we come back to History Now, I'm going to talk about the changes in technology here on History Now on ONTV.
We own a Habitat home.
I love working on my Habitat home.
Soy dueño de una casa de Habitat.
My neighbor is a Habitat homeowner.
Being a Habitat homeowner has changed our lives.
My mortgage payment for Habitat is less than what I paid for rent.
Habitat for Humanity of Oakland County currently has homes available with mortgage payments lower than most rent payments. If you or someone you know needs decent and affordable housing, call 248-338-1843 or visit our website at habitatoakland.org.
Welcome back to History Now here on ONTV. When I was talking about that there was a lot of excitement for war, that war will be over by Christmas. They had no idea what was going on. Now, by 1915 and 1916, especially 1915, a new player enters the war, especially against Austria. Italy enters the war. Now, it's weird because Italy was part of that Bismarck alliance system, but Italy also wanted land at the expense of the Austrians. So, Italy declared war on Austria and later on Germany in 1915 under the theme, "Our enemy is the German." Now, Germany was also having success in the east. The Battle of Tanningsburg was a major part of that. Germany was manhandling Russia in the east. Now, Russia had men, but Germany had firepower. And as a result, Russia was losing men in the billions. And many Russians were blaming Tsar Nicholas II for that, and he was, as a result, Russia was heading to the brink of civil war. Then you also had the introduction of tanks, airplanes, poison gas. Germany was advancing on Belgium in 1915, but they were stopped by a combined British and French fleet in France. So both sides ended up digging trenches, and both sides engaged in trench warfare, which impacted morale from both sides. The Battle of the Somme, which took place in 1916, there was 10,000 British and French dead, one day alone. The morale of people were expecting a quick war, that the war would be over by Christmas. Both sides lost so many, an entire generation was lost thanks to World War I. People were begging to be left out, fearing that they would die. People would intentionally injure themselves, sending them to hospitals. And if they were well enough, they went back out to the front. It was very, very difficult for both sides. If you were living in war, to go out there and to die, that's very difficult. That's difficult on a family. That's difficult and people on both sides started questioning, why have this war in the first place? War was bad. Why fight in the first place? Germany was resenting the Kaiser for this. The leaders, same with the British and the French, they were resenting their leaders for why go to war. As a result, there was one country that was benefiting from the war, which was the United States. The United States benefited. They declared themselves neutral in World War I. They felt it was Europe's problem. They traded with both countries. They traded with Britain and France. They also traded with Germany. There was a large German-speaking population as well. And there was also, and the U.S. had enjoyed pretty fair ties with Germany. They had pretty good ties with Britain and France. Now, with what was happening in the Atlantic especially was both sides began seizing ships. Both sides were sinking ships, especially the Germans under the U-boats. In 1915, the Germans sank the British cruise liner, the Lusitania, which left 100 Americans dead. The United States demanded that Germany apologize, Germany pay war reparations, and as a result, the Germans were balking at paying the reparations, but the Germans would apologize for the bombing of the Lusitania and the losses of life, but they justified it, saying that the British were carrying more missiles, but still that caused tremendous anger in the United States. Now, as I said, in the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire was fighting with the British and the French in the Middle East, and the Ottomans viewed it as a call to jihad, siding against the, quote, infidels. But the problem was, this wasn't a, quote, Middle East War of the Crusades. The Ottoman Empire was siding with Germany, who was perceived as another Western power. So many Muslims did not go to war, did not go to jihad against the British and the French. So as a result, the British and the French were able to recruit some nationalists, particularly in Turkey, which would become modern-day Turkey. And also, many Muslims simply did not go to war for the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was the sick man of Europe. So the British and the French were able to, especially the British, were able to take over Constantinople, was able to occupy Iraq, was able to fight off the Ottoman Empire in Syria and Lebanon. And as a result, in the Middle East, we would see at the end of the war, the French would gain control of what became Syria and Lebanon. The British would gain control of Iraq, and also the Ottoman Empire ceased to exist. It became Turkey. So, but because the Ottoman Empire aided Germany during the war, the Ottoman Empire eventually dissolved with its own, basically dissolved because of their alliance with Germany. Now, excuse me, the Russian Civil War began on February 1917 with the overthrow of Tsar Nicholas II. The Germans were manhandling the Russians, and it caused tremendous pressure on the Russian government. And as a result, the Russian people overthrew the government of Tsar Nicholas II in February of 1917. Now, the Bolsheviks didn't take power until October of 1917, in which at that point the Russians were asking for a way out of the war. And as a result, Germany and Russia signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in 1917 with Germany, and that actually allowed Germany to gain the initiative for several months going into on the Western Front, because Germany was always afraid, going back to the Bismarck era, of fighting a war on two fronts, which they ended up doing throughout World War I. They were fighting the British and the French out in the West, and then they were fighting the Russians out in the East. So they were fighting a two-front war, which they would eventually do 20 years later in World War II, but they were fighting a two-front war, and it's not easy to fight a two-front war, but now that Russia's out of the war, Germany could gain the initiative on the West and ultimately defeat Britain and France, while at the same time allowing the United States to stay neutral. Well, that is not going to happen. When we get back to History Now here on ONTV, I'm going to talk about the United States role and then the Treaty of Versailles here on ONTV. welcome back to History Now here on ONTV. I'm your host, Anthony Terramina. I want to talk about, at this point, we're in 1917. Germany has regained the initiative. Russia's now out of the war. Excuse me. Austria and Italy are fighting to essentially a stalemate. But now the Allies, Britain and France, are going to gain a major ally in the United States. In 1917, the Germans decided to resume submarine warfare after promising the United States in 1916 they would not sink any more ships. The Germans decided to resume unrestricted submarine warfare. Also, the British intercept a telegram from the German Foreign Minister, Zimmermann, who wanted Mexico to get involved in the war. Mexico at that time was fighting their own civil war, but Mexico was promised California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. Obviously, Carranza, who was the president of Mexico, knew that this was not going to happen, that this was going to risk war with the United States, and he did not want war with the United States. So Britain intercepts the telegram, gives it to President Woodrow Wilson. The American public is furious. April 1917, they go to war with Germany. That was a mistake. I mean, you get the United States, but the thing was, the United States was not a proven military force. They had just started to downgrade the army a little bit after the successful occupations in Cuba and fighting the Spanish-American War. But still, it was, now the Germans have a new enemy in the United States. So the United States was starting to push in their troops into Europe, into France. Wilson also had an 11-point peace plan. So the Allies were beginning to push Germany back into German territory, and Wilson's peace plan was actually, which was initially proposed in 1915, 1916. Germany starts to look at the peace plan of Wilson and decides to agree and decides to capitulate on a position of strength. So, and as a result, what was happening, the German government collapses. There was fear of revolution, that the, quote, the bankers, particularly the Jews, were responsible for Germany's surrender, Germany's defeat. The Kaiser is forced to abdicate. And as a result, there was fear of civil war in Germany, especially following the success of Russia. So Germany thought that it was surrendering or capitulating in a position of strength. So the war ended on the 11th day, the 11th hour of November 11th, 1918. So as a result, it led to the Treaty of Versailles, which it impacted Germany severely. It reduced their troop numbers to 100,000 men. They lost colonies. They were forced to pay war reparations. Germany felt that it was stabbed in the back because of and actually they didn't get that paid until very recently. The war reparations were all paid up. And as a result, it led to a bitterness amongst Germans, especially amongst the right. You saw Adolf Hitler was furious with the peace. President Hindenburg, who was a general in the East, defeated Russia. As a result, he was furious with it. He was on the right. It caused a bitterment amongst many Germans on the right. And it would set the stones for World War II. Also, there was 4 empires lost. The German Empire, the Austrian Empire, the Russian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. All 4 lost all four were considered the biggest losers of the war. They had no hand at the peace table. They had no control what was going on. And then there were states that were being created at their expense. Poland was created. Czechoslovakia was created. Austria and Hungary were forced to separate. Yugoslavia was created out of and it all started over a mess in the Balkans. So what did the victorious Allies do? They put these ethnic groups together and formed the country of Yugoslavia. That was not going to go well, though Yugoslavia did survive until the 1990s. As I said, the Ottoman Empire crumbled, became Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq. The major power was Turkey. Germany lost a lot of territory, especially to Poland, Czechoslovakia. Italy was expecting to gain a lot out of the. Italy was expected to gain some land out of it. They did not. It also led to the group called the League of Nations, which shockingly the United States was not part of, because the United States, led by the Republican Party at that time, did not want to get involved in European affairs. The United States was enjoying a nice economic boom until the Great Depression. Britain and France were getting peace. It was a brief peace, but they both wanted peace. Especially the French had suffered so much on their territory. And as a result, both sides were very happy with peace. Peace, the quote, the Neville Chamberlain thing, peace in our time, which would only last until 1939. Japan gained land. As I said, they took advantage of Asia. They became a superpower until 1931, when they went to war with China, and that triggered into World War II against the United States. World War I's Peace of Versailles led to World War II. And I would encourage you guys to watch my World War II documentary that I have. And all the actions of World War I led to World War II. All right, Lake Orion, I'm going to head on out for the day. This is Anthony Termina signing off. See you on History Now on ONTV.